The afternoon sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Gregory's corner office, casting long, dramatic shadows across his polished mahogany desk. It was the kind of opulent, top-of-the-world office that screamed success, power, and untouchability. I could hear the faint, almost imperceptible hum of the central air conditioning, a stark contrast to the frantic pounding of my own heart. Outside the glass walls of his office, I could see the distant, muffled chatter of my colleagues in the open-plan workspace. They were completely oblivious, their heads buried in their monitors, unaware that their department head was about to make the biggest, most catastrophic mistake of his career. "You're not a team player, Vanessa," Gregory said, his voice a blade of ice. He leaned back in his executive leather chair, a picture of smug authority. His eyes, which I once thought were friendly and encouraging, had narrowed into predatory slits. "Maybe you'd be happier working somewhere else." I sat across from him, my hands clasped calmly in my lap, watching as he delivered what he clearly believed was a devastating, final blow. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind 100 times, playing out every possible scenario, every word, every subtle shift in his expression. I had anticipated tears, pleading, or perhaps a furious outburst. He had expected the same. My composure was the one thing he hadn't planned for. I took a slow, deliberate breath, keeping my voice steady despite the inferno of rage building inside me. "I understand," I replied, my tone even and professional. The surprise that flickered across his face was a small, satisfying victory. He had expected a broken woman, not a composed adversary. "Should I clean out my desk now?" I asked, the question laced with a placid indifference that further unsettled him. Gregory's eyebrows shot up slightly. He had expected tears, maybe pleading, certainly not this calm, almost detached response. He was used to people crumbling under his authority, not meeting it with a spine of steel. "Yes," he finally managed, clearing his throat to regain his footing. "I think that would be best. Human Resources will contact you about your final paperwork." "Of course," I said, rising from my chair and smoothing down my navy blazer. It was a power move, a small gesture of control in a situation where he thought he held all the cards. I looked him directly in the eye, a flicker of a smile playing on my lips. "Thank you for the opportunity to work here, Gregory." As I walked toward the door, I could feel his eyes boring into my back, a mixture of confusion and simmering anger. He was probably wondering why I wasn't begging for my job, why I wasn't promising to be more of a team player if he'd just give me another chance. What Gregory didn't know was that this wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. What he didn't know was that I had been meticulously preparing for this exact moment for months. "My name is Vanessa Kim, and until 15 minutes ago, I was the senior marketing analyst at North Peak Engineering in Portland, Oregon. At 34, I had painstakingly worked my way up from an entry-level position to leading the highest-performing team in our entire department. I loved my job. I was passionate about the intricate dance of data, creativity, and strategy. My campaigns had generated over $2 million in new business this year alone, and my team had consistently exceeded every quarterly target set for us. I was good at what I did, and I had earned the respect of my peers and, I had thought, my superiors. But none of that mattered to Gregory anymore. Not since I had politely, but firmly, declined his third dinner invitation in as many weeks. 6 months earlier, I had been thrilled to join North Peak Engineering. The company had a stellar reputation in the construction industry, known for its innovative approach and massive infrastructure projects. They were designing everything from cutting-edge residential complexes to sustainable public works. As someone who had always been passionate about marketing in the complex, technical engineering sector, it felt like the perfect fit. Gregory had seemed professional and supportive during my interview process. He was 42, married with 2 teenage daughters, and had been with the company for 8 years. He spoke enthusiastically about the department's goals and seemed genuinely impressed with my background in technical marketing. The first few months were everything I had hoped for. I was challenged, respected, and given the autonomy to lead my team to new heights. My team and I developed a comprehensive digital marketing strategy that increased lead generation by 35% in the first quarter alone. I implemented new tracking systems that gave us unprecedented insight into our target demographics. Gregory praised my work publicly and even recommended me for a company-wide innovation award, which I won. I felt like I had truly found my professional home. But somewhere around month 4, things began to shift. It started subtly, almost innocuously. Gregory would linger by my desk a little too long when discussing projects, his gaze holding mine for a beat more than was comfortable. He began asking about my weekend plans, his questions veering from professional curiosity into something more personal. "You look nice today, Vanessa," became a regular greeting, always delivered with a smile that, over time, began to make my skin crawl. Initially, I tried to brush it off. I told myself I was overthinking, reading too much into innocent comments. I had dealt with overly familiar bosses before, and I knew how to maintain professional boundaries without creating workplace drama. I would offer a polite, brief thank you and immediately pivot the conversation back to work. Then came the first dinner invitation. It was on a Friday afternoon in month 5. Gregory appeared at my desk just as I was packing up for the weekend. "Great work on the Morrison account presentation, Vanessa," he said, perching on the edge of my desk in a way that felt deliberately casual yet invasive. "How about we celebrate with dinner tonight? I know a great Italian place downtown." I kept my response light but firm. "That's very kind, Gregory, but I have plans tonight." "Thank you, though." His smile flickered for just a moment before returning, full force. "Of course. Maybe another time." I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The invitations became more frequent, always framed as work-related celebrations or team-building opportunities that somehow only ever involved the two of us. Each time, I declined politely, offering a different, plausible excuse. And with each refusal, the atmosphere changed. When I declined, Gregory's demeanor would shift. He became more critical of my work, questioning decisions that he had previously praised. He started scheduling last-minute meetings that ran late, then suggesting we continue the conversation over dinner. My performance reviews, which had always been stellar, remained so on paper. He couldn't deny the numbers, but I could sense the change in our dynamic. Gregory was no longer seeing me as a valuable team member, he was seeing me as a challenge to overcome, an object to be conquered. The professional respect I had worked so hard to earn was evaporating, replaced by something that made me deeply, profoundly uncomfortable. The breaking point, the moment I knew I had to do more than just politely decline, came during our quarterly performance review 3 weeks ago. Gregory had called me into his office to discuss my annual evaluation. It should have been a straightforward conversation about my achievements and goals for the following year. "Your numbers are impressive, as always," Gregory said, scrolling through the report on his computer screen. "The team really responds well to your leadership style." "Thank you," I replied, relaxing slightly. Maybe I had been overthinking everything. Maybe we could get back to a normal working relationship. In fact, Gregory continued, turning to face me with that familiar, unnerving smile, "I think it's time we discussed your future here. There might be a promotion opportunity coming up in the next quarter." My heart skipped with excitement. A promotion would mean more responsibility, better pay, and validation of all the hard work I had put into building my career. That sounds wonderful. What would the role entail? Gregory leaned forward, his elbows on his desk. "Well, that depends on how committed you are to being part of the leadership team. It requires a lot of collaboration, relationship building, sometimes working closely together outside of normal office hours." The way he emphasized "closely together" sent a chill down my spine. I kept my expression neutral, but inside, alarm bells were ringing. "Of course," I said carefully. "I'm always willing to put in extra effort for important projects." "Excellent." Gregory's smile widened. "Why don't we start with dinner this Friday? We can discuss the details of the position, maybe talk about your long-term career goals. I'm thinking somewhere nice, maybe that French restaurant on Northwest 23rd Avenue. There it was. The quid pro quo I had been dreading. A promotion dangled like a carrot, contingent on my willingness to blur the lines between professional and personal relationships. I appreciate the consideration, Gregory, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. But I prefer to keep business discussions in the office. Perhaps we could schedule a formal meeting with human resources present to discuss advancement opportunities? The suggestion of involving human resources was deliberate. I wanted to see how he would react to the prospect of outside oversight. Gregory's mask slipped completely. His face flushed red, and his voice turned cold. Vanessa, I'm beginning to think you don't understand how things work here. This company values team players, people who are willing to go the extra mile to build relationships. If you're not interested in being part of that culture, maybe you should reconsider your career path. I'm very committed to my career, I said firmly. I just believe in maintaining professional boundaries. Professional boundaries? Gregory repeated, his tone mocking. That's an interesting way to describe being uncooperative. The conversation ended there, but I could see the wheels turning in Gregory's head. He was done with subtlety. The gloves were about to come off. That was the moment my fear solidified into cold, hard resolve. I went home that night and didn't just brood. I acted. I purchased a high-quality voice recording app for my phone, one that could run discreetly in the background. I also began my research. I had a friend who had gone through a similar ordeal at a different company, and she had given me the name of her lawyer. That night, I spent hours online, researching employment law, hostile work environments, and retaliation cases. I read legal precedents, articles, and personal accounts. I was arming myself with knowledge. Over the next week, my work environment became increasingly hostile. Gregory began micromanaging every aspect of my job, demanding detailed reports on tasks that had never required oversight before. He criticized presentations that had previously earned praise, finding fault with formatting and word choices that he had approved just days earlier. He started excluding me from high-level meetings that I had always attended. Important emails that should have been copied to me mysteriously went to other team members instead. The most damaging incident occurred during a client meeting with Portland Metro Development. I had spent weeks preparing a comprehensive marketing strategy for their upcoming housing project. But when we sat down with their executive team, Gregory undermined me at every turn. What Vanessa is proposing is certainly creative, he said with a patronizing smile. But I think we need to take a more conservative approach. Let me walk you through some alternative strategies. He proceeded to present a watered-down, uninspired version of my original proposal, taking credit for the research and insights I had developed. The clients looked confused by the mixed messaging, and I could see our credibility slipping away in real time. After the meeting, I confronted Gregory privately, making sure my phone was recording. What just happened in there was unprofessional and damaging to our client relationship, Gregory. His response was ice cold. What happened in there was leadership. Maybe if you spent less time worrying about boundaries and more time being a team player, you'd understand the difference. That night, I called my attorney, Margaret Thompson. I had found her through a referral from my former colleague. Margaret specialized in employment law, and her reputation was formidable. When I called her office, her secretary scheduled an appointment for the following day. Margaret's office was in downtown Portland, occupying the 15th floor of a sleek glass building. She was a woman in her 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and an air of competence that immediately put me at ease. After I explained my situation and played several of the most damning recordings, she leaned back in her chair and nodded grimly. "You've done exactly the right thing by documenting everything," she said. "These recordings clearly establish a pattern of harassment and retaliation. The fact that he's tying your job security to personal dinner invitations is textbook quid pro quo harassment." what are my options? I asked, feeling a mixture of relief and apprehension. We have several paths forward, Margaret explained. You could file a complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, pursue internal resolution through your company's Human Resources Department, or prepare for potential litigation if the situation escalates further. Given that your supervisor has already begun retaliating against you professionally, I suspect this situation will continue to deteriorate. I'd recommend preparing for all possibilities while trying to protect your current position as long as possible. She was right, of course. When I returned to work the next day, the tension was palpable. Gregory barely acknowledged my presence during our morning department meeting, and when he did address me directly, his tone was dismissive and cold. The third and final dinner invitation came exactly 1 week later, and it would prove to be the final straw. I was working late, trying to catch up on projects that Gregory had unnecessarily complicated with his new micromanagement requirements. The office was nearly empty, with just a few dedicated employees scattered throughout the floor. Gregory appeared at my desk at 7 p.m. "Still here, Vanessa?" "That's dedication," he said, though his tone suggested he found my work ethic more annoying than admirable. "Just finishing up the quarterly reports," I replied, not looking up from my computer screen. "You know, this reminds me, we still haven't had that dinner conversation about your future here. Third time's the charm, right? How about we head out now and grab something at that steakhouse on Burnside?" This time, I looked up and met his gaze directly, my phone recording our entire exchange. "Gregory, I've made it clear that I'm not interested in dinner meetings. I'd prefer to discuss my career development through official channels." His friendly facade cracked completely. "Official channels?" he repeated with a bitter laugh. "Do you have any idea how this industry actually works? Do you think successful people get ahead by hiding behind policies and procedures?" "I think successful people get ahead through competence and hard work," I replied calmly, though my heart was racing. Gregory leaned down, placing his hands on my desk and bringing his face uncomfortably close to mine. "Let me be very clear, Vanessa. Your attitude problem is affecting your team's morale and this department's productivity. If you can't adjust your approach to collaboration, you might find that your skills aren't as valuable here as you think they are." The threat was unmistakable, and I had it all on recording. "I understand," I said quietly. But what Gregory didn't understand was that he had just handed me everything I needed to destroy him. The final confrontation happened on a Friday afternoon, exactly 3 weeks after my meeting with Margaret Thompson. I had spent those weeks meticulously documenting every interaction, every slight, every professional setback that could be traced back to my refusal to have dinner with Gregory. My team's morale was suffering under his increasingly erratic management style. He had begun questioning their work as well, apparently trying to build a case that my leadership was somehow infecting the entire department with attitude problems. Jessica had confided in me that she was considering looking for another job, and 2 other team members had expressed similar concerns. The breaking point came when Gregory announced that he was reassigning the Morrison Industries account, my biggest client and most successful ongoing project, to a junior analyst named Kevin, who had been with the company for less than 6 months. "I think Kevin could benefit from the exposure to high-level client management," Gregory announced during our team meeting, as if this decision made perfect sense. The room fell silent. Everyone knew that the Morrison account was complex and required deep knowledge of their industry and specific needs. Reassigning it to Kevin wasn't just arbitrary, it was potentially damaging to the client relationship and the company's reputation. After the meeting, I requested a private conversation with Gregory. We went to his office, and I closed the door behind us, making sure my phone was recording. "Gregory, I need to understand the reasoning behind reassigning the Morrison account," I began. "That client relationship has taken months to develop, and they specifically requested to continue working with me." Gregory didn't even pretend to have a legitimate business justification. "Vanessa, I've been very patient with your attitude, but I'm starting to question whether you're really committed to being part of this team. He launched into the same speech he'd given me weeks before, his voice dripping with condescension. "So what specifically about my attitude concerns you?" I asked, keeping my voice professional. "You know exactly what I'm talking about. Your unwillingness to engage in the kind of relationship building that's essential in this business. Your insistence on maintaining unnecessary barriers between yourself and leadership." There it was. The clearest statement yet that my job performance was being judged based on my refusal to socialize with him outside of work. "Are you saying that my professional relationships should extend beyond office hours?" I asked, wanting to get his answer on record. "I'm saying that people who want to advance in this company need to show that they're willing to invest in building trust and rapport with their supervisors. If you can't do that, then maybe this isn't the right environment for you." The ultimatum was finally out in the open. Submit to his inappropriate advances disguised as networking, or face continued retaliation that would eventually force me out. "I see," I said calmly. "And if I continue to decline dinner invitations, you'll continue to reassign my projects and undermine my position here?" Gregory's face reddened. "I'm not undermining anything. I'm trying to manage a department, and that requires team members who are willing to be team players. If you can't understand that basic concept, then yes, you might be happier somewhere else." "Understood," I replied. And with that, I knew the game was over. He had just sealed his own fate. That afternoon, I received the termination notice. It was exactly as Margaret and I had predicted. The meeting was a formality. "You're not a team player," Gregory said coldly, his eyes narrowing as he leaned back in his executive chair. "Maybe you'd be happier working somewhere else." I smiled as I packed my personal items into the cardboard box that Human Resources had provided. My coffee mug, the small succulent plant that had brightened my desk, the framed photo of my graduation from business school, all of it went into the box with careful precision. "Should I expect my final paycheck to include severance?" I asked conversationally, as if we were discussing the weather. Gregory shrugged. "That's between you and Human Resources. I'm sure they'll be in touch." I stood up, box in hand, and looked around the office one last time. My team was watching from their desks, confusion and concern written across their faces. Jessica looked like she might cry. "Well, it's been educational," I said to Gregory, extending my hand for a final handshake. He hesitated for a moment before accepting it, probably wondering why I wasn't more upset. "Good luck, Vanessa." "Thank you," I replied. "I have a feeling I won't need it." As I walked through the office toward the elevator, I pulled out my phone and sent a single text message to Margaret Thompson. It simply said, "It's done. He terminated me today at 2:30 p.m., exactly as we predicted." Her response came back immediately, "Perfect. I'll file the complaint first thing Monday morning. Are you ready for this?" I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the ground floor. "More than ready," I whispered to myself. What Gregory didn't know was that I had 47 recordings of our interactions over the past 4 months. What he didn't know was that I had documented every instance of retaliation, every professional slight, every inappropriate comment. What he didn't know was that Margaret Thompson had already prepared a comprehensive, 37-page complaint that would be filed with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and the Oregon Bureau of Labor and Industries simultaneously. And most importantly, what Gregory didn't know was that I had spent the past month quietly building relationships with former employees who had left the company under mysterious circumstances. The elevator doors opened, and I walked out into the Portland afternoon with a sense of anticipation that I hadn't felt in months. Monday morning arrived with a fury that Gregory never saw coming. I was sitting in a coffee shop downtown when my phone started buzzing with calls from unknown numbers. The first few went to voicemail, but by the 5th call, I decided to answer. It was a reporter from the Portland Business Journal. By noon, 3 different reporters had reached out, requesting interviews about workplace harassment in the engineering industry. The story was out. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Kevin from your old team. Gregory called an emergency meeting this morning and cancelled all client meetings for the week. What's going on?" I didn't respond, but I smiled, knowing that the chaos was just beginning. The legal and public relations nightmare for North Peak Engineering was swift and brutal. The detailed, time-stamped recordings were undeniable. The complaint, which Margaret had also forwarded to several employment rights organizations and legal advocacy groups, painted a clear, damning picture of sexual harassment and retaliation. By Wednesday, the story was trending on social media under the hashtag #DuberNorthPeakHarassment. Gregory had made one fatal error in his calculations. He assumed I would disappear quietly. He was about to learn exactly how wrong he had been. Margaret called me Thursday afternoon with an update that made my day complete. "Vanessa, I just got off the phone with North Peak's legal team. They want to discuss a settlement." The tables had finally turned. As I reflected on the journey from victim to victor, I realized that sometimes the best revenge isn't loud or dramatic. It's simply the quiet, profound satisfaction of watching someone face the consequences of their own choices. Gregory had taught me that documentation and patience are the most powerful weapons against workplace predators, and I would carry that lesson forward into whatever came next. The settlement was substantial, enough to give me the freedom to start my own marketing consulting firm, specializing in, ironically, ethical workplace practices and branding. My first clients were several of the former employees who had also suffered under Gregory's reign. Together, we were building something new, something better, on the ashes of a career he had tried to burn to the ground. He had thought he was ending my career, but in reality, he had just launched it into the stratosphere.